Hey everybody, it's time for Chapter 7's main mission of Barrack Saga. Now I'm not gonna lie, this one is long and it was super tiring and demoralizing to make. But now that it's over, I actually feel really good about this map. So let's get started. The first thing, as always, is preps, which are fairly extensive. And the first thing is that I've decided that I've had too easy a time with my money management so far, so I'm going to buy the coffers. And what these do is that every map I get to open it up and get usually a vulnerary, but sometimes a better healing item. So before I move the chapter on, I went into my office and picked up the first one, and I'll get another go as soon as I advance the chapter. Moving on, we do the usual stuff on the mercenary screen. Because my funds are a bit more limited than before, I have to be kind of careful, and in particular I am not rehiring Volo. That's because his happiness is already 12, so I don't need to hire him again. I am going to get him after this chapter. Anyway, this chapter's letter comes with a couple of sign-on stallions, which is excellent, because several of my units are in need of better horses, and this map is going to take its toll on several of my mounted units, so it's great to have those as a backup. Next up, I'm going to buy quite a lot despite my low funds, and the first thing here is a fresh Nightsword, because Wards 1 is getting pretty beat up. In order to fund some of my extravagant purchases, however, I am going to sell some of my bags, one of which is on Ward and another of which is on Faye. Faye still has a bag that I can't sell because it belongs to her, not to me, but Ward's bag privileges have been revoked for now. The next thing I'm going to do is go to the bow and arrow shop in order to buy a composite bow. And if you know this game well, you probably know where this is going. In addition to the bow, we also want to buy some new steel arrow pluses for Sylvis, because she likes having the extra power and accuracy in some situations. Next, we're heading to the stables to hand out one of the flashy new sign-on stallions, and in this case I am giving it to Ruby. She already has a horse, but it's on pretty low health, and Ruby needs to see lots and lots of combat, obviously, so she can do with the best horse that we have. Next we go to the atelier, where I can buy yew wood, finally, and after that I can use that with the composite bow that I bought and some materials that I've been hanging on to in order to create the Aperon bow, which is a pretty handy bow that Sylvis is going to be using. Now, I would have been able to do this a lot earlier, as soon as composite bows became purchasable, if I had managed to pick up the house with the yew wood back in the first map of the game, but unfortunately I didn't, so it's only become accessible now that yew wood is purchasable. Next up, I hire Sherpa despite how expensive he is, because he is absolutely critical to a low turn run of the upcoming chapter. There's another cutscene here that isn't a civilian request. This involves Enid and Perceval, and I believe that it is necessary for Enid's promotion, which is important because we need to promote Enid to get Derek. Finally, we go and purchase an escape stone, which I'm giving to Sherpa. I completely forgot about this during chapter 6, where it could have saved a turn, but I'm getting it now because there's a chance that Sherpa might need to use it. It doesn't end up happening, but that was my thinking at this point. And then it is time to head to the Kingfisher Pavilion. There's some actually useful food going around this time around. Kramer is picking up a whopping plus 20 bonus to his hit, which is going to make him a lot more reliable in combat. Ruby gets a salad, which somehow reduces the damage that her horse is going to take, so that's really good. And Faye gets an Arrowbane meal, which means that she's going to be able to more reliably dodge enemy archers when she's deployed. And the last thing is, of course, trading around some of my shit. I need to trade Aperon from Reese to Sylvis, and Sylvis is also going to be getting the killer arrows back from Christine. And then Ruby is going to be taking the liquid speed. This is guaranteed to come out of the coffers the first time you open it, and I gave it to Ruby expecting that I might use it during this map, but in the end that didn't happen, and I think this was actually an error. I just kept forgetting about it. Anyway, she also takes Elbert's Aspis away from him because hers is starting to get a bit worn out. So that's preps. Let's move on to the map. Now we are yet again playing Green Unit Babysitting Squad here, and it is of course an escape map, so it's going to be fairly tedious with making the green units do what we want them to do as quickly as we can. In this map, only one of the green units, Vester, has to actually escape, but he tends to move last, so all of the other green units are pretty easily going to make it before him, so that's pretty cool. For deployment, the main deviation from my usual patterns that you'll notice is that I'm bringing Perceval, because on this map I need a lot of 2 range, and Silver alone just doesn't cut it. The first move I make is to rush Ruby forward into the darkness for the usual reasons of me wanting to get weapon experience for her, and she baits out a couple of units. She chips down the Spearman enough for Kramer to finish him off, but I have a contingency. If she didn't manage to do that because she got hit, I would have had Perceval move in and weaken this guy using Mercy instead, so that Kramer was guaranteed to get the kill. Instead, I needed to take an action and I chose to move Dean forward, and that meant that one of the other enemies didn't move to attack. The Spearman's defeat means that Reese has space to move in and fight the axe enemy that Ruby chipped down. But unfortunately, Reese fails to kill him thanks to a miss and a shield block, so Ward is going to have to move in to finish that guy off. If Reese had managed to finish the axe guy off, which is very likely, I would have delayed Ward's turn for quite a long time, because another enemy with a crossbow would have moved up to Reese and attacked him, and there is about a 50% chance that that guy would move to a space where Ward would be able to reach him and attempt to one-round KO him with the Knight Sword. The other 50% of the time he moves as he does right now to a space where Ward would not be able to reach him regardless. So that's just how the enemy AI works in this game. And now that I have moved all my units, light has fallen on the biggest problem in this map. There are gates with 100 hit points, and there is pretty much no good way to break through these fast other than Sherpa, thanks to his Brim Ranger, which lets him hit them 3 times in a single action. And Sherpa, of course, also has fantastic strength. But even with all of that, Sherpa is not able to one-round KO these gates, so we need to have someone move in to chip the gates first. And for the first one, I chose to use Laurentia to do that, and she then cantos across to in range of our enemy bow unit. Sherpa does not immediately move to finish off the gate though, because the enemy archer that Laurentia is now in range of will move fairly early in the turn, and having him go before Sherpa means that Sherpa takes less damage overall, which is quite important due to Sherpa's low avoid. Both of these 2 upper archers have swift bows, which means that they get 2 attacks no matter what, and that's a real pain. And Silvers demonstrates that by missing her attack and then getting whacked twice in a row, putting her in a pretty awkward position. But now Sherpa is able to move in and finish off this gate, and the space where he is important because it leaves him in range of Owen's Physic Orb. In addition to breaking down the gates, Sherpa's Brim Ranger is very good at one-round KOing the enemies, and because we moved Sherpa in quite early in the turn, tons of the enemies between the first 2 gates are going to make a move on him, and that means he's going to clear out an awful lot of them, which makes getting to the later gates that much easier. Most of these early enemies to attack him have hit rates in the mid-60s, and that's pretty scary, but he manages to dodge quite a few, And getting some dodges here is pretty important, because some of the enemies that attack him later on in the turn have substantially higher hit rates, and will kill him pretty easily if all of these guys hit. This enemy who's attacking Sherpa right now is pretty dang tanky, because he has high defense and a shield, but even if he shield blocks every single time, Sherpa will kill him in 2 hits, so that's just a testament to how amazing Sherpa is. Now, there's going to be a fair amount of stalling, as I think, throughout this video, but that's just because this game is pretty unpredictable, and I do eventually decide that now is the time to have Owen use his Physic Orb to heal Sherpa up a bit, because he has taken 1 hit, and is going to probably take a couple more. But all of this has been well worth it, because Sherpa has taken out practically every 1-range enemy in that first area. The scary thing though is that there are 2 cavalry enemies who were waiting in the back, and they have much higher accuracy against Sherpa. It's pretty rare for him to dodge either of them. So when they come running in, he manages to 1-round KO one of them, but we need to keep him safe. So Reese is going to move in and use a vulnerary to block Sherpa off from the other one. Reese has a pretty good chance of 1-round KOing these guys, but unfortunately this guy goes all try-hard on this run, and Reese doesn't get a crit to make up for it, so 2 shield blocks later he's still alive, but that's alright. Now, Sherpa is still in a pretty precarious position in range of a couple of archers, so I have Ward come in and use the guard skill on him to keep him safe from being killed by them, which is pretty necessary because there is a 3rd archer who's a bit further away, and he is much stronger and would easily be able to kill Sherpa with accuracy that I cannot just hope to dodge. Now, Perceval has a go at chipping one of the swift bow guys, and this is a rare instance of 2 plus weapon users dueling it out. Unfortunately, Perceval manages to miss both of his attacks, but fortunately he activates Arrowbane each time, and so he also takes no damage. And then Sylvis, fortunately for her, manages to dodge both of the swift bow hits and inflict some chip on her own. And that leaves the remaining archer to go for Sherpa and instead miss Ward thanks to guard. Now, Dean is picking up a kill here. This is the first kill on this map, but it's not the last. This turned into a pretty good map for him, so that's pretty nice. And Ruby is going to use the opportunity to practice her sword rank against an enemy who can't counter. That is the guy who broke his crossbow trying to attack Laurentia earlier. And then one of the bosses, whose name is Gilgamesh, demonstrates how annoying he is because he has Dark Mend, and enemies healing other enemies have been a thorn in my side this whole time. Gilgamesh is also irritating because he can switch to a very strong 3-range magical attack if he wants to, and that has caused deaths several times, so I don't like him. Now, we need to start busting through these enemies, and Kramer unfortunately is not able to 1-round KO them, so I have him chip down the bow enemy because he will not counterattack said enemy if they decide to attack him, but he does end up counterattacking the cavalry unit. He also ends up taking a crap ton of damage, which is scary, but it all works out. And the enemy with the swift bow actually breaks said bow trying to attack him. And I didn't mean the enemy with the swift bow because there's another one, but he got chipped by Sylvis last turn, and Sylvis is now able to use the aim skill to 100% guaranteed eliminate him, and that means that we're pretty much done with the threatening enemies here. We do, however, need to kill both of them in order to open up some space, because Sherpa needs to attack, but also we still need to chip the gate a bit, because it hasn't taken damage yet. So Laurentia uses her ability to fly over the enemies to move across and kill off the remaining archer. And then, in order to deal with the cavalry unit and open up the space adjacent to the gate, Ruby is going to move through and have a go. Ruby would not be able to get this kill if the enemy managed to get a shield block, but fortunately he does not, and Ruby picks up her kill. So that's excellent. But we're not quite done with the complexity of decisions in this turn yet. So I decide to have Ward move in and chip at the gate first, but then I get kind of indecisive, and the reason for this is I want to break down the gate as soon as possible so that I can move in and kill Gilgamesh before he retreats behind the main boss, or worse, attacks one of my units and kills them. So it's very tricky, but eventually I decided that Sherpa needed to be healed by Owen above the threshold for how much damage he's going to take before he moves in to finish off the gate. And then, of course, he does that with 1, 2, 3 attacks in a row, which is ending up dealing quite a beating to Brim Ranger itself, but fortunately it doesn't randomly break. Reese is now able to move in and attack Gilgamesh, and he finishes him off with a single blow thanks to a critical hit, which is extremely cathartic for me because in my test runs I would routinely have Reese miss one of his Gram attacks, failing to kill Gilgamesh and leading to him killing one of my units. But now we are at the point of having to deal with the main boss of this map, whose name is Nielsen. He has extremely high HP and defense, and he has a shield to make it even worse, so we have to rely on critical hits to bust through him. And in the end, I was forced to decide that this was just too unreliable to do in the minimum turn count. So I have now lost a turn because of this guy and his bulk. Perceval is going to attack him first, because magic is one of the ways to deal a lot of damage to him, but unfortunately Perceval's accuracy isn't the best, and that means that Nielsen dodges one of the attacks, which is extremely irritating. Reese then proceeds to miss the only attack he gets in the counter-attack, which is really annoying because Reese, I was relying on him getting crits, and it turns out that was a 92% that he missed. And he goes ahead in this round of combat and misses another 92, so the RNG really was against me here, and I just kind of had to accept it. Now, what I should have done next was have Kramer trade the rapier over to Ward, because Ward could have potentially gotten a critical hit, and the rapier also ignores the shield that Nielsen's bulk really depends on. So that would have been a good idea, but unfortunately I did not come up with it, and instead I eventually decided that Laurentia was the next unit who I wanted to send in, and she of course did pretty much nothing at all worth mentioning, so that is not really the smartest decision I've ever made. But the next decision was, hey, it's time for Sherpa to have a go, and Sherpa is also not very likely to finish this boss off because of his shield there, and indeed after 3 whacks with that, the boss has taken a grand total of 0 damage from Sherpa, which is bad. Oh well. I think my idea was that I was saving Ward's action to chip at the door, but I feel like Ward would have had a better chance of doing tons of damage to the boss with the rapier than Sherpa, so I should have switched those. Anyway, another mid-boss has sneaked out of the fog. His name is Lebrus, and he's kind of annoying because he has really high avoid, but fortunately Sylphus has sniper arrows that I picked up a while ago, and she is able to pretty reliably chip him down, so that Dean is able to finish him off with exact damage on a desperation hit. So that is the second kill for Dean on this map, which is awesome. If Dean had missed that attack, I would have reset, but as it stands, I decided that because I got that kill, it was worth keeping this save and eating the turn loss. Now, I make some pretty dumb seeming decisions here. Ward just waits rather than doing something useful, and then I have no idea why I didn't move Ruby her full movement out rather than one short of that. I don't know, it's weird. Anyway, Kramer is picking up a kill on the archer who broke his swift bow, thanks to the scimitar plus, giving him 2 attacks, and the extra 20 hit, giving him actual accuracy. And he is struggling to get to level 10, he's still level 8, but he is still going to be doing work in this chapter. Now, what I did achieve with all my chipping on the boss in the previous turn was putting him into exact range for Perceval to finish him off with 2 Dire Thunder hits on this turn. And while I was recording attempts, the game was uncharacteristically kind. I did not miss a single Dire Thunder over the course of 7+ attempts, which is pretty cool. The trouble with having to take multiple actions to break open this gate on turn 5 is that Vester always waits right at the start of the turn. And that means that in order to break open this gate and have him start moving at the earliest time possible, we have to do it no later than the first action of turn 5, which obviously didn't end up happening. So that's what cost me the turn, but it does mean that all of his green allies get a little head start on him. And because of that, they are all going to be able to escape, which is always nice to see. Based on their positioning, I feel like a proper LTC would leave at least one of them behind, so that wouldn't be quite as cool, I don't think. Anyway, this is where Ruby probably should have used her liquid speed, but I forgot to do it, so she doesn't, and that means that something else is going to happen a bit later on. Anyway, Ward needs to rush forwards because there is still some combat later on that only he is really suitable to do, but we'll get to that in a moment. For now, Dean is picking up a nice kill, bringing him up to 3 kills on this map, and that also gets him to level 10, which would be really nice if he was one of the units who needed level 10 to be permanently recruited, but alas, we still have a bunch of kills to go. The hardest part of the map is now pretty much done, but the map is very much not over because there are still quite a few enemies waiting for us in the northwestern part of the map, hidden away in the fog. And they are positioned over there so that they can attempt to pick off all of the badly damaged green units that we are having to escort. So we need to deal with that somehow. Perceval is moving out of the way here. He was occupying a space that a green unit would want to move into later on, and I thought that this was costing a turn. It didn't turn out that way. The green units are just really dumb. But that's the reason why I moved Perceval early on in this turn. So now back to Ward. There is a guy who has been using the battle cry skill over and over as the map has been progressing. And he is an archer and he's really annoying. I don't have my super high void units Volo and Faye to bait him out. So I have to take another attack with Ward being able to easily live the hit, especially with a shield block, and that's going to disable Battle Cry and give the rest of my units a large amount of freedom of movement that they lacked while that guy was still active. This does lead to the death of Ward's horse, but I'm fairly sure that was only a thin horse in the first place, so its lifespan wasn't really long, and we can well afford to get him another one if we need to. Laurentia and Reese are both rushing towards the southwest in an attempt to reach a civilian request in a house down there. This is the only civilian request that I'm going to manage to pick up on this map. The others are somewhat tricky to get to. There is one down in the lower right part of the map, which involves using a search unit and fighting through an enemy down there. And I think you can understand why going for that one would cost too much time, because both of my search units are infantry and they'd have to get all the way down and then all the way back to the escape point. Sylvis has a go at chipping this enemy, but she misses, wasting another killer arrow, which is, yeah, I'm not the happiest about that. So instead we need to bring in Laurentia. Now, the funny thing about this enemy is that he has the counter skill, which lets him counterattack even when he takes damage. And that means that if he misses Larentia, she would get 2 attacks against him, even though she dealt damage with the first one. Sadly, she does not dodge, and instead gets injured, and then the guy runs over to Sylvis and injures her as well. So it's injuries all around for my guys. But that means that Sylvis is able to shoot him in the face point blank with aim, so it's not all bad. And that means that she does enough damage to him that Kramer is able to come in and finish him off. Now, the rapier is not strong enough to do this in a single blow, but remember, this guy has counter, so he gets to counter attack even though he takes damage, and so Kramer is able to finish him off with a follow-up attack. And his shield is immaterial thanks to the rapier. Kramer reaches level 9 here, but he still has got work to do because I really want to get him to level 10 as soon as possible. The Battlecry Archer decides to have a go at Ruby, and that locks him into position so we can deal with him at our leisure. Now, I was talking about the civilian requests. The other civilian request involves deploying Sherlock and bringing him over into this town to visit a specific house. That would have given us some Raijin arrows, which are pretty cool, but unfortunately I did not have space to deploy Sherlock, so that one's out as well, I'm afraid. Now, as you can see, the green units are mostly trying to escape by going due north, but one of them decided that it was far better to go running over next to Owen instead, putting him well out of position. And that's a really annoying tendency with the AI that I'm going to complain about in more depth later on. But for now, let's just sum it up as green units are really dumb and I don't like them, especially in escape maps that require them all to escape. Damn it, Kaga. Alright, Dean nearly got an extra kill here, but unfortunately he was foiled by a shield activation, so someone else is going to have to pick that up. But first, Ward is going to chip away at the Battlecry Archer with a fairly low percent hit, and then the crossbow guy who broke his crossbow against Larentia ages ago, he made it to the escape point and he ran away, so bye bye experience. There's now an Overwatch guy in Reese's way, and he can't move through the forest to get around him, so instead he goes straight in front of him and gets completely hammered. And this also leads to the death of his horse, which is again unfortunate, but not something that we can't deal with. I mean, this is basically the whole reason why I saved a sign-on stallion at the start of this map. Reese is probably going to be getting that one. And Ruby takes up arms to finish off the Battlecry Archer, again with not very good accuracy. And she also dismounted to attack from the house, getting her closer to the escape point than anything she could attack from while mounted. She reaches level 8 and finally gets a somewhat decent level up, at least in terms of leveling up her equipment stats. But honestly, still no strength, Ruby. I'm starting to get worried about your offensive output. And this guy also dropped a longbow, which is the mistake I alluded to earlier, because Ruby has a full inventory and she has to toss something. But I chose to toss the longsword because it is now on red durability, and that means it only has 1 hit left in it anyway, so it's much more worth to keep the longbow. Now, speaking of her good equipment level up, I'm not sure how much equipment experience you get from a successful level up, and if someone knows, I'd really like to know. Is it a full 10, so a full visible point from a level up? Or does it just give you 4, like attacking? Or is it just raising you to the next nearest full point? I would really like to know. My testing kind of indicates that it's a full point each time, but I would like to know for sure. Anyway, Kramer and Sylvis are moving in to deal with this crossbow guy. He has some kind of brave crossbow, which means he's very scary, especially when in Overwatch mode. And Sylvis picks up the kill on him, which is good because Sylvis hasn't been getting all that much experience throughout this map. Kramer has been hogging it all, and so just for this one, he hands it off to Sylvis instead. He's not going to end up getting to level 10 in this chapter, but he is going to get very close, and he's definitely way closer than Sylvis, who is still only level 6. Dean picks up his fourth and final kill of the map, and for some reason I didn't click Desperation there, maybe because I was afraid of still missing and taking too much damage on the counter, but whatever, it worked out, and Dean got his fourth kill, or 39th overall I believe. Now, there is another boss on this map. His name is Qadi, and he sits near the escape point, and I've actually had Reese left in his range for quite a while, which was kind of reckless, because Reese is on very low health after being whacked by the Brave Crossbow. So I'm going to pull him back and use a vulnerary, which was probably unnecessary because Owen is going to heal him shortly. But anyway, Qadi moves up and now attacks Kramer instead, which is good for us because Kramer is holding onto a rapier, which means that Qadi's shield does absolutely nothing. But yeah, Reese gets fully healed here, and he also doesn't take any more damage for the rest of the map, so using the vulnerary was a bit of a waste, but oh well. So I mentioned earlier that while in the prison cell, Vester always waits first, which means that we have to open the cell right at the start of the turn to get him moving immediately. But the really frustrating thing is that after you open the cell, he changes to always moving last in the turn. And that means that if his allies are in the way, he is going to lose spaces at some point during the map because of how stupidly they move. And so that's kind of just the absolute worst of both worlds on his AI. So if anyone ever feels like making a ROM hack in this kind of style, please do not make the AI behave this way. Thank you. Alright, Kramer continues to chip away at the boss. As mentioned, his rapier makes him suited for this, especially because it also gives him the chance to get a critical hit. So the boss is getting very weak at this point. Meanwhile, for some reason, I decided to have Ward kill a guy that Dean would have very easily been able to take out on this turn, so that was kind of daft of me too, but alas, it is what it is. Now, there is one crossbow dude remaining, and Sylvis is going to step up and chip at him, except that, of course, she misses, so instead we're going to have Perceval step up and do the chipping. Perceval is not able to one-round KO this guy with Dire Thunder unless he gets a critical hit, so it is safe for us to use him to chip here because we want to feed this kill to Kramer, of course. Perceval has honestly turned into a real asset, and he's even more so because I could have used Mercy, I just forgot to, and that would have made him perfectly reliable in weakening that guy for Kramer, unless he missed. But because I've left him alive, he is able to reactivate his Overwatch skill, which he does for some reason rather than attacking Ward, which I would have expected, but oh well, we're just going to have to deal with the restriction of him sitting there. Owen heals up Sherpa for a little bit of experience here. You'll notice that he's using heal rather than physic as much as possible at this point. And then Laurentia is going to dismount and move down to a house to complete the one civilian request that I am able to do in this map. I've already gone over the specific reasons why I felt that they were too far out of the way to do, but more generally it should be clear by this point that every single one of the units I chose to deploy has a specific role to play that's important to the strategy, and so I really did not have room to deploy someone like Zine or Sherlock as well. It's now turn 10, and that gives me an opportunity for rigging something, and what I choose to do is rig a cripple onto the boss, allowing Kramer to move up and capture him pretty easily. This gives us 11 sword and a fresh Aspis, and also means that he's not going to barge over and attack Sylvis. Ward escapes from the map on this turn, and then Ruby moves past the crossbow guy for the usual reasons of getting an opportunity to activate her shield. The reason why I had Ward escape first is that if I didn't, Ruby would then be overwatched while in his space and should be pushed back to her starting position, and I did want her to get that one tile of advancement here. So at this point, the map is basically over once again, and all that remains is watching all of my units very boringly walk to the escape point and then leave. So let's talk about cutting this map down a bit. In theory, Vester can get from his starting point to the escape point in 7 turns of walking, which would mean that we should be able to complete this chapter on turn 12, or even turn 11 if you manage to break open the door before he acts on turn 5. But as I mentioned before, the Green Unit's AI is so stupid that Vester pretty much never manages to actually do that. I tried for quite a while to see whether I could get him to escape on turn 12, and it just didn't happen, because the Green Units pretty much always walk into the double forest tile rather than across the house. That would give Vester his fastest movement path to the escape point. And so this is what we end up getting. Now, turn 12 is probably the most deep strategic turn of the entire map, in which I use all of my masterful tactics to immediately click end turn and then watch the green units do their thing. There are no relevant enemies left, so this is all I have to do, just wait for the green units to make their way over. The question mark house currently on screen is the one that Sherlock would have to visit, by the way, for the Raijin arrows. And anyway, Vester is now running away, so it's time for the rest of us to make our way out. Owen, as always, is going to use his return skill to get off, because that means he has no positioning requirements whatsoever. And finally, Reese escapes in order to complete the chapter in 13 turns. I'll see you next time.